Hey, are we starting soon or?
Okay, guys, you can start singing now.
We can start singing right now.
Yes.
The first song, okay. Okay, let us start. Okay.
Yes.
The first song. Okay.
Now.
Song. Keep on moving. Stop. Oh yeah. Keep on moving. Yeah. In this life, hustle, yeah, for real. Yeah. Better days seem to have deserted us. But we walk through the storm just like we survived the rain. Thrown into a water, should have known. Now so better to throw somebody to go with. Going in a maze of what we blazing. But gotta keep on the low. Blazing with the rope, keep my head high. Like a drop on the 10th shoulder. We keep rolling, we keep rolling until we reach for the sky. Better days, better days, better days. I'm searching for better days. Yeah. Come on, I'll keep on moving. Cause I won't mind our windows. I'll bend. I'll keep on moving. Cause I won't mind our windows. I'll bend. Believe you can be my one day, become rich one day. You just gotta be strong. It's been a long journey, narrow my destination. With expectation, we nothing but seen friends losing hope. Many on the road, but we need the chance. The second chance to go and go and go and go and go. We know it. We know, we know it. We know I'll never be a loser. I'll never be a loser. Moving. Cause I won't mind how we lost. I'll bend. Cause I'll keep on moving. Cause I won't mind our windows. I'll bend. Don't get up on disabilities, not inability. Yeah, for real. Downtown to down, yeah. Don't care about disabilities, not inability. Yeah, come on. Oh, na, yeah. Come on. Picture this, the whole world stuck in a maze, gambling. Not knowing where to go, they don't care. Though we hustle and bustle, we so mean, we don't care. As long as we keep in this storm. Oh, we know it. We know, we know it. We know I'll never be a loser. Let us say, this is all about the struggle, life. We keep hustling, hustling, and hustling. Nothing can ever stop us as long as you're breathing. This is all about us, it's about life. It's a gift of life that we got. No back. Broken wings many times. No matter what, you gotta keep a good head on shoulders. Yeah. I'll bend. Yeah. Keep on moving.
All right. All right. Thanks so much. That was live from Uganda. Marvin Natigi, Jumplo, Luke Taco, Ilaya, and Denso International. We're really happy to work with them. Marvin is a singer, but also human rights activist, and we're happy that we make the connection with Africa this evening here. So my name is René Keith. I'm a psychiatrist in the Netherlands, and I'm chair of the European Community Mental Health Services Network, EUCOMS. And so we strive for a human rights-based community mental health across Europe and beyond. And one of our principles there is that the importance of peer expertise, the importance of lived experience as a resource that we can use. And for that purpose, we now work together. We're really happy to work together with the Global Mental Health Peer Network. And that is now represented by my co-chair today, Claudia Sarter. Claudia.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be online today. So as Renee said, I'm from the Global Mental Health Peer Network. I'm the Deputy CEO, and we're a nonprofit organization that works on international lived experience advocacy as it pertains mental health. We're about capacity building, leadership development, and mentorship for people with lived experience. And we currently have a global footprint across the 6 World Health Organization regions. So happy to be here, and yeah, we'll hear more from our participants later. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And then I'm happy to introduce the first speaker of this webinar. So in the first hour, we have a series of speakers, both from Europe and from Africa. And all our webinars of EUCOMS are always opened and closed by a person with lived experience, by a peer expert. And also when the topic is about peer expertise, of course, we still stick to that rule. So I'm really happy to introduce as the first speaker, man. I've worked a long time already with him. He also has run in the past the Secretariat of EUCOMS, and a very skilled peer expert from Norway, Torbjørn Monhagen. Torbjørn, can you open this webinar for us, please?
Thank you. Thank you for getting me back in EUCOMS, Renee. I'm going to start with a short presentation from Norway. I think it's in its place, and see if we can comment at the end of the webinar. So I'll share my screen now. Let's see. Okay, so I'm opening this webinar as a peer worker, and I guess that's kind of share short why I'm doing this. So let's see if I can. Yeah, I grew up with a kind of troubling background with a father that was severely mentally ill, and you know what happens to that kind of kids? You know, they fall off the wagon and everything. And then I got back to life again, and this is my father. This is 2007, after my second falling into too much drug addiction. And then in 2011, he kills himself. And that makes me go into a kind of deep depression again, and also have my own suicide attempt. And after that, I kind of just had to do something, go back and do something on suicide prevention. So I started working with this, and this is kind of my wife and my first kid today. And I think that this is a Norwegian poem, but I'll translate it for you to English, because I think it's a really good way of thinking, why are we doing this? You know, why are we working on this at all? So this is a poem for the boys and the girls who had to give in their fight against the darkness, for they are beautiful people. They're at the front line in the fight against darkness, and it is for them we must fight with light switches on our fists, for we cannot allow the dark of night to just walk around and swallow people. I think this is kind of the basis for everyone working in mental health, with peer workers or whatever, that this is why we are kind of wanting to make a difference and kind of get rid of the darkness. But you know, everyone is struggling in life. You know, this is kind of a nice illustration of that. And I think that we have to recognize that also professionals of all kinds have lived experience, that we have to motivate them as peer workers, that this can be a resource for the services. And I think that this is under something that is not, this potential has not been taken out of the services, and we have to have more brave professionals out there doing this. And in Norway, at least, there are lots of documents stating that we should do peer workers and peer support and everything, but there's no one telling us how to do it. So it's kind of interesting to also hear what's going on in other countries. But in Norway, this is growing really fast. We have now 260 full-time equivalent peer workers in the counties, and it's growing fast. But we are still working on how we're implementing it. And that's why we created our organization, the National Association of Peer Workers here in Norway, to try to do that more, be supportive of the peer workers there. And this is, you know, a little, what you call it, a small kind of gnome or thing, you know. And what is this doing? This is from a Swedish film called Ronja Røverdatter, and this little gnome in the movies, or goblin, he says why, and that's one of the kind of resources for peer workers, that they come into the services, they question everything. Why are you doing it like this, and why are you doing it like that? And gradually then changing the services from within where they are employed. So this is also an important role for peer workers and peer support across the globe in mental health services. So why do you do it? Why do the psychiatrists, why are you talking about peer workers, peer or patients like this, and so forth? And what is it that peer workers, from my perspective, brings into the services? First of all, the part of hope, and for the second, they're bridge builders, making it easier for people to gain access to the services or gain trust in the services. And also, we're kind of the patient's guard dog, in a way, or advocate in many ways. And also, I think this is kind of most important for me from seeing this over years, is that the peer workers create innovation in the services that is quite unique, from user panel projects to changing services, creating new services for people, at least in Norway. And I think this is also happening across the globe. So what is the next one? Yeah, well, this is what peer support is about, and I like this. I actually found a new therapy form that I really want to implement across the world, and it's called PlayStation therapy, which is you do regular stuff together with people. And I had this really good story about a young peer worker in a FACT youth theme, which was like they had this patient, the young person they could not reach at all. He was like sitting in his room in the darkness, playing games, and they were like, how should we reach him, discussing with the psychiatrist. And then he just, okay, what if I just sit in the living room playing PlayStation for 1 hour a week? And then after, gradually he came out, and they bonded over the PlayStation or the thing. And then they kind of, that's the way to, don't talk about difficult stuff, but just do usual stuff together, which is something I think that peer workers can do in a more genuine way, in some sort. And I see this again and again in the Norwegian setting, at least. But this is like, I'm the blue monster there, and I'm kind of running around and the lived experience into the services all the time, and then people, the little man there, he's like, oh, maybe, but what does it cost to implement it? How do we do it? At the same time, like let's see, the government wants us to do it. The service user organization are really pro this, they want more lived experience. They want the service user voice to be lifted in the services. And also the research shows that this works. Like, there's a growing body of research that shows that this has impact on the services in a positive way. We've used studies all over, but I think it's about the money. It takes time to implement, and also it's different from country to country. I think we have a lot to learn from each other, but it costs money to start this, and it takes time. We have to be patient, but as service user representatives or people with lived experience, we're like, we want to change everything now, but it takes time. And it's all about the culture and the stigma, and also about knowledge, of course. And I think that's one of the things we're actually working on in Norway, at least. As of this October, we're launching the first book on peer workers in Norway. So it's 13 chapters. And this is just a part of the growing, kind of pushing this knowledge out there. So I really look forward to hearing the presentations, and thanks again for inviting me to this webinar. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your strong message, and the way you illustrate is really helping to get the message across. So please, if you have any question to Björn, we will do that in the second part of this webinar. Put in the question and answer section, and also feedback. I'll place it there so we can get into a dialogue with you. And I see many people entering from many different countries, so welcome to you all. Really nice to have you here. The next speaker is from Croatia. So I'm from the Netherlands, when Norway. Now we go to the Central European part, Croatia. And I'm really happy to introduce the next speaker, Vlatka Rosic-Petak, because she's also worked with her quite a long time, and in fact many years already. And she's also a member of the board of EUCOMS. It's sort of one of our practice what you preach principles, that in a network of mental health services, we want to have a peer expert in our board, and we're happy that Vlatka is at. And in Croatia, something remarkable has been going on with an association called the Madness Association, and that's what Vlatka represents. So Vlatka, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share presentation. Oh, it's on the end. Ah, upside down. Well, hi everyone, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you. Let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Vlatka Rosic-Petak, and I'm an expert by experience and president of MEDN Association. I have experience of hospitalization in a psychiatric hospital, experience of recovery and peer work. I founded and work in MEDN Association. MEDN Association was founded on the need for personal affirmation of people who have experienced mental health problems like I did. It was just an idea of a small group of people with a big dream. Our wish was to empower people within the community by creating a peer support network of equals. From the moment we started MEDN Association, professionals look at us like we were dangerous, giving instructions to their clients to stay as far as possible from us. A few years later, many of them tell their clients to come to us once they leave the hospital. We are also co-founders of the Croatian Alliance of Mental Health Associations, which currently has 19 members. Our mission is promoting psychological diversity and new models of care about mental health within the community. And vision, society is aware of the fact that we are all 100% human in a wonderful common madness. In many European countries, treatments are no more long-term treatments in large institutions, but treatments in the local community. This approach needs strong intersectoral cooperation. In Croatia, the approach to mental health care is mainly biomedical, based on hospitalization and therapy with psychopharmacs. Community-based mental health care services focus on prevention, treatment, and recovery of people with psychosocial difficulties are not developed. Measures of coercion and restraint are still present during hospitalizations. The consequences of the lack of services in the community are multiple hospitalizations, loss of work ability, stigmatization, and permanent placement into the social care institutions. There is a significant violation of basic human rights within health and social institutions. Because of this, the mental health care system is not cost-effective, and it is a financial burden for the entire community. In our environment, peer work is still not recognized as a value. In our association, we are working continuously on the development of a non-institutional peer-to-peer support system. We have peer support groups, mobile peer team, and peer support network across the country. Peer support groups are maintained in continuity from the beginning, each week for the last 11 years. Groups are drop-in, drop-out, open to everyone in need. These are not psychotherapeutic groups. They are facilitated by peer experts. We insist on talking about the responsibility for our feelings and choices we make. We are creating a safe environment where we can share our fears, experiences, and thoughts. We learn from each other. Social work students come to our groups as a part of their field assignments, where our members are their mentors. People come to the groups of their own will because they want to be there, without any benefit other than well-being. Mobile peer team for psychosocial support in the community currently exists for 7 years. We have one-off and continuous interventions for people in need. The staff consists of peer workers and mental health professionals. For peer workers in our mobile team, we organize supervision and consultation led by mental health professionals. We work with mental health professionals who respect our principles of work based on equality and equal opportunity. There is a great need for peer support groups and interventions of the mobile peer team throughout Croatia. People often call us and ask if this kind of service is available in their cities. That's why we connect with 7 mental health associations from across the country and conducted the project that was funded by the European Social Fund. With our knowledge and experience, we are conducting education and training for peer work. We have already encouraged the establishment of 8 peer support groups and 7 mobile peer teams in several cities. We developed a peer support network across the country, and we continuously support them by giving them consultations for peer work. But so far, almost everything sounded like a fairy tale. Now let me talk about challenges. During the implementation of the European project, our association was exposed to classic administrative violence by Croatian bureaucracy. In that period, we have exhausted all our financial and human capacities to the maximum. There is no continuous financing, so we are spending 70% of the time on the bureaucracy and 30% on our activities. There is a very few professionals who respect our work based on peer values. There is no curriculum of formal education for peer work and no job definition for peer workers in the system yet. In our mental health system, there is no practical application of the knowledge gained from international twinnings projects. Personal experience and informal education are not valued like diplomas and degrees. There is still a lack of information, misunderstanding, and ignorance about peer values among professionals. We accepted with rational optimism the news about our government finally adopting at the end of November last year the strategic framework for the development of mental health until 2030. We waited 6 long years for that important strategic document based on human rights approach to mental health care in the community focused on recovery. We contributed to the adoption of the document through our advocacy activities. We succeed to include the concept of peer support and peer work in the text of the strategic framework. But the financial resources necessary for the implementation of the new strategy have not been secured, and there are no action plans yet. We are aware that we are just at the beginning and that we will have to multiply our efforts in order to initiate change in the system. And now, for the end, something completely different. These days, it's popular to ask artificial intelligence about anything and everything. So we asked Microsoft Bing L what peer support groups are. And we got answer that in Croatia, Medna Association provides peer support, and this is a short description of our peer support groups. So artificial intelligence recognizes our work, and who knows, maybe it will offer us a good tender in the future. And meanwhile, we will keep calm, or don't, carry on, and definitely stay involved. Thank you for attention.
Well, thank you, Vlatka. Congratulations. If you're on ChatGPT, you exist. That's modern thinking. So congratulations with your result and the recognition. Even by AI now recognize you. So really amazing what you build up. And to the audience, please give your feedback and your questions. I don't see questions yet, but put them on the question and answers so that we can have a further dialogue later on. I'm going to hand over to Claudia now to introduce the next two speakers. Claudia.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think just before I introduce to the next speakers, I just want to say thank you to Toby and Vlatka as well for wonderful presentations. You know, we speak so much about peer support and how it's not yet recognized, and some places it is recognized. And just very quickly, last week I was in Chicago mentoring peer researchers. So those that are starting very early in their career, even though they could be at different ages, be it younger or much older. And a lot of the interest was, how do we include lived experience into this and explain what peer support means for all the different countries? So we had about just over 20 peer researchers worldwide. It was really interesting to see. So I'm kind of like listening to your presentations and going, yes, we're getting there. Slowly but surely we're getting there. So thank you for your presentations. It was really wonderful. So I'm going to move on to our next presenter. So Charlene Zinkel, she is the Global Mental Health Peer Network CEO and founder. And you're going to learn a lot from her from this presentation. She's personally my mentor. So I'm going to hand it over to her. But I mean, years of experience in lived experience and years of experience in bringing what lived experience is into the world. So Charlene, over to you. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And let me share my presentation. Yes, so I started the Global Mental Health Peer Network, also based like the previous speakers from my own lived experience. And when I hear the previous presentations, it just reminds me the value of people with lived experience, going through our experiences and what we are capable of actually establishing. So I will be talking about the experiential and the monetary value of lived experience. I think it's first of all just to kind of emphasize exactly what is an expert by experience. So as you heard, we all have this experience, someone with a mental health condition. Our experiences also come from how we navigate system to try and access services and services that are right for us. And also many of us face atrocities, I mean, segregation, all the bad side of services, but sometimes also the good side of services. And of course, also our personal journeys of recovery. So based on this expertise that we've developed over years of our journey, actually puts us in a perfect position to provide unique insights, awareness, and where we are also able to provide practical solutions through not only our personal experiences, but also collective, because we engage with a lot of other people with lived experience and hear about common issues and common experiences. So that then gives us kind of a collective experience of mental health conditions and what we are going through throughout our journeys. So if we look at the experiential value, you already heard from the previous two speakers who spoke about the value basically of service delivery, specifically of peer support services. I'm always envious of when I hear these stories of how peer support work's been integrated within a mental health system. because from South Africa, it's still something not recognized as well or not heard of. I can always even go as far to say it's non-existent in South Africa. But our value, our experience also brings value to corporate sectors, academic and research organizations or institutions. Claudia just mentioned she were lecturing or providing training to academic institutions. So that value that we're also able to bring. And especially if you think of training of professionals, mental health professionals, whether it be psychiatrists, general practitioners, social workers, nurses, all of that. We can play an incredible, valuable role in that. And then in terms of government, giving our inputs and expertise into the drafting or reviewing of policies and legislation, but also strategic planning around service development. But for me, it's always important, we are also able to be involved in a monitoring and evaluation of service delivery. You heard from Vladka, she spoke about their involvement in their policy, where they managed to get the phrases in of peer work and peer support. So that is kind of the value that we can bring in terms of government. And then international agencies, here I'm referring to like the UN, WHO, we've been a lot involved in contributing there to global guidelines, strategic plans, reports, and also developing minimum standard service packages, also to give that push to countries to implement these things. And then we've been involved also with other non-profit sectors. We kind of collaborate with other NGOs. Sometimes these NGOs are not lived experience per se, so we always bring that perspective when we campaign and collaborate with other organizations. For me, one particular emphasis that I want to place is our involvement in policy. If you really look at it, if people with lived experience are not included, our perspectives and recommendations not included into policy, what happens is that there are services that does not really align with the needs of service users and to promote their quality of life. And that in itself result in wasteful expenditure. Money that can be a lot better used just for peer support work. If you heard funds, we need funds to push into that as well. So really, if lived experience are not involved in policy, policy becomes merely words and pieces of paper. So then it means nothing. So implementation and including voices are very important. Another aspect of expertise where we are valuable is in terms of research, where we either can also lead or co-lead research projects. And very important here is that we need to be included and play a valuable role from the start. So it's from developing research questions, planning and developing the project, also data collection, because we also got a lot of connections through our own networks of people with lived experience. So we play an important role in that, but also to analyze, interpret data. Sometimes researchers may not necessarily understand how people with lived experience may respond to certain questions. So we can assist in terms of that as well through our own experiences in relation to the project. And then dissemination as well. I think research changed a lot. It's no more for only the scientific community, but especially people with lived experience and lived experience organization, especially like with us at the Global Mental Health Peer Network, we find research extremely important for advocacy. So dissemination of research, which we use in our advocacy initiatives. Because governments will always ask you, where's the evidence if you want something? So research for that reason is very important. So strengthen our advocacy initiatives. But of course, as previous speakers also suggested, there's always obstacles. So what are the obstacles really that we find through our experience of advocating for inclusion of people with lived experience? across all the sectors, including research, policy, and also service delivery. For me, 3 aspects stand out. Stigma and discrimination, which essentially devalue personal and collective experience. A big one is people do make an effort, but how to involve people with lived experience meaningfully and authentically is often the question. And then thirdly, neglect. And here we go to the monetary value. Neglect to adequately budget for lived experience inclusion. And just that devaluing of the monetary value, also devaluing the experiential side of things. Just to look at each of these, stigma and discrimination. So devaluing the personal collective experience. So that often happens when there's a misperception of people with lived experience being unable to contribute due to limitations resulting from their mental health condition. There's also a misunderstanding that people can't make decisions because of the mental health condition and therefore cannot participate in decision-making processes. Paternalism, often with the best of intention, is also an obstacle because others have this automatic response to make decisions for us because they think they're doing it in our best interest. And then power imbalances is also an issue. And I think you may even find it in peer support work. I think Vladka spoke a bit about it, the resistance from when they started with peer support work. They weren't really recognized and accepted as a component of service delivery. Now, the obstacle in terms of how to involve lived experience, like I said, there are great efforts from stakeholders how to include, but I don't think they understand the role of lived experience at all stages of research or other plans and strategic plans. I even got responses where I try to emphasize lived experience to be included in all of these sectors. And I often got the response, we're not qualified. So there's also that devaluing of that. And then concerns about ethics. I've seen that a lot in research. There's always this thing about, ethics can't include people with lived experience without consent and all that. So that also creates a barrier. And then about the impact of mental health and well-being when people participate in this. Yes, in certain instances, for example, research projects, that may be where the participant may share personal experiences. Yes, it may impact on a person, it may trigger something, but that's not the issue. The issue is that there must be measures in place. How do you support people when they participate and to maintain their mental health and well-being throughout these processes? And the last one is adequate budget. There's always been, and I think it's a historic thing that people with lived experience must always, just do things or be involved in a voluntary capacity. There's never consideration given to what it costs that person or the organization they from in terms of their own resources that they use. I'm talking about like data usage. You still have your time, there's a lot of other costs need to be considered, and your expertise itself also has a cost to that. And then, not considering the value of the expertise itself, like I just mentioned. Equal pay for equal work, just to highlight, there are international human rights instruments that call for equality and recognition of the value of people with lived experience towards advancing socio-economic and sustainable development. Specifically, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights speak of the right to work and remuneration to be fair and equal. So for work of equal value. I just put a few quotes from our members when we asked them, how they felt the first time they received payment for their lived experience. I'm just going to read for time purposes. I'll just read one of them. I was valued It's a recognition because the lived experience knowledge is priceless. We had been through valuable lessons that's worth more than anything. When I decided to contribute my expertise, my intention is helping others. So it's about respect and dignity. A lot of our members refer to the phrase dignity. So I think the monetary value also got that attached. It's dignified principle to pay people for their expertise. So when we engage, I'm just briefly going to mention here, principles of effective engagement. There must always be diversity and equality. So when people with lived experience are sharing their expertise, diverse communities, you cannot exclude, population groups and different voices. There must be mutual respect and trust, no power imbalances, non-discrimination, non-tokenism. Empowerment is also very important. For example, a lot of us participate in research. We are not necessarily got academic or research backgrounds, but we still can add value. So therefore, there needs to be an empowerment component to it that we are able to meaningfully contribute. And then also to value our contributions. It's one thing when you contribute and what you contribute is not valued, that then becomes tokenism. I just want to refer in time, I'm not going to read all of this, but the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities specifically also talk about the recognition for the value of people with disabilities, and that includes, of course, psychosocial disabilities. Even the fairly recent WHO World Mental Health Report also notes that people with lived experience are crucial stakeholders in mental health, that our participation is vital to the improvement of mental health systems, services, and outcomes. And such participation includes full empowerment, as I referred to before, and involvement in mental health advocacy, policy planning, legislation, program design, service provision, monitoring, research, and evaluation. So, yeah, the end of the story is that we do have a lot of value to contribute to various sectors within mental health and health domains. I thank you very much for listening to me, and happy to hear any questions.
Thank you, Charlene. That sums up very nicely what we do, what we offer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in the chat itself our website. And the reason I'm doing that is because we have developed publications and policies and guidelines on effective engagement and how to do it. So you come from different fields, you might be able to just have a look there. And then we've also been involved in writing papers for the different medical journals on these types of things. So maybe as extra resources for yourself and when you disseminate, I think that's just something worth adding. So have a look at that. But thank you so much, Charlene. It's very important to equate the value that we have from experience to also monetary, because then we're valued as professionals, giving some proper insight. So thank you so much. Right, so I'm going to move on to our wonderful Godfrey. Welcome, Godfrey. So just to give a bit of background, Godfrey is a member of the Global Mental Health Peer Network. He has been from the beginning one of our most loyal members. It's been wonderful watching him grow. He's from Uganda. He's an honorary member, which means he's been with us for a long time and he's not going anywhere. He's staying with us. You're not going anywhere, Godfrey. And he's the principal coordinator for the movement for global mental health as well, and very, very active within anti-stigma programs. So don't want to take much time away from you, Godfrey. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia, for such a wonderful introduction, but also to thank Charlene for such a wonderful presentation about what the peer network is currently engaged into. But also how best we can engage those of us who are affected with these challenges to be key stakeholders in informing policies, but also processes of research. Without wasting much time, you're going to allow me to share my screen. And I think you hope to notify when you're able to see it. Okay.
Yes.
You see it? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. As earlier introduced, my name is Godfrey. I'm joining from Kampala. I'm the founder of an organization called Twogere. Twogere simply means let's talk. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to do some work around anti-stigma programming. We understand that mental health world over is highly stigmatized. As our initiative is trying to create positive conversations so that people are able to seek these services. Yeah, when I was preparing this presentation, I felt that maybe I need to give you a bit of background to the problem in the country. We all know that mental health challenges are affecting millions of us globally. But for the case of Uganda, we are seeing that an estimated 35% of people are battling these challenges. And if we compare that to the 13%, which is a global prevalence, we can see that Uganda is not doing well in this area. But also we continue to see that 70% of the mental health cases we do have, the many times they are originating between the ages of 11 to 24. And despite that we have the highest burden of mental illnesses, we see that stigma is still prevalent across board. So we see those who are affected experiencing stigma and discrimination in almost all aspects of their lives. We see that those affected receive denial and participation in the community work. We see quite a lot of them, their rights being abused, and also issues around access to care and support. They do remain a challenge in the country. But also in terms of budgeting, we are seeing that in terms of health care budget, we are seeing that less than 1% of the health care budget for your mental health services. We are not doing any level of estimate when it comes to our community mental health services, but also in terms of human resources, we are seeing one psychiatrist to a population of 1 million. So we're also seeing that there is research out there that indicates that about 9 out of 10 people with mental health challenges, they did say that they have experienced stigma and discrimination at some point. So we also know that people with mental health problems are among the least likely of any group with long-term health conditions or disability, for instance, to find work. It's a bit a challenge, as we have seen from the previous speakers, but also being in a steady or long-term relationships, but also in terms of finding accommodation, but also we see to be socially included into mainstream society aspects and activities. Yeah, now, I think we all know that stigma, broadly, we can categorize it about 3 categories, one of it being public stigma. And this has to do with the negative attitudes that other people, especially those that do not have the lived experience, have about those of us who are experiencing these challenges. You hear them in communities referring to those of us with lived experience as being wasted, associating the illness to witchcraft, associating illness to us being violent, and all sorts of insults. But also we have the self-stigma that has to do with internalized shame that comes with a diagnosis of mental illness. you'll find, for example, when I was diagnosed myself with depression about 12 years ago, I felt as if my condition wouldn't allow me to do the kind of dreams that I had. I felt a lot of shame within me. Yeah, so that is self-stigma, but also we have institutional stigma. And that many times reflects in areas of policies, of government, but also private organizations that intentionally or unintentionally, for example, discriminate or limit opportunities for those of us with the challenges. So institutional stigma can manifest into, for example, lower funding for mental health services, but also denying people with lived experience work opportunities, but also in many countries where they have insurance covers, many times you find mental health is not covered as part of the insurance packages. Now, if stigma is not addressed, many times it can make those of us with these challenges the symptoms may get worse, but also it may cause delays or stop us from getting the necessary help. But also it is also associated with social isolation, then unemployment. So in other words, you see that stigma and discrimination can trap those who are already affected in the cycle of illness. But now the good news is that stigma can be reduced. And I know some of us were already doing some kind of work in our respective countries. And the question we should be asking how, and today I'm going to be sharing what we are doing in Uganda in terms of trying to reduce the stigma that is around mental illness. So the person you are seeing on your screen is myself, Godfrey. So the journey started in 2009. That's when I was at university. So I was diagnosed with severe depression. So on the course of that very journey, I realized that stigma had forced me to keep quiet about my own struggles. But also through that very journey, I realized that there are quite many young people like myself in institutions of learning, but also in the community settings that who are experiencing these issues. So following my personal experience with depression and the stigma, I founded Twogele, which I earlier alluded to, that it means let's talk, in 2012. I was still at university, and this started as a support group, so we could come together as university students to share the experiences that we face on a daily basis. So through that experiences, we did realize that opening up about our own struggles, it was something that would reduce the stigma along with the conversations of mental health. So later in 2017, the organization was registered as a community mental health organization, and we continue to work around changing the way we think and act about the mental health conditions. Yeah, so our approach is threefold. One, we reach out to young people, and our target audiences, many times we approach them from schools and universities, but also those young people who are in communities. And then after reaching out, we educate them about mental health problems. And we are using our stories as a tool to reducing the stigma around these challenges. So by educating them, we also encourage help-seeking behavior for mental health services when needed. Yeah, so our theory of change is very straightforward. So we identify young people with lived experience of mental health conditions from communities. And then after identifying them, we do train them around how they can effectively share their stories. Then the open sharing of these stories empower others, the people we are targeting in communities, with their knowledge about these challenges are improved. And if we have their knowledge improved, that we are trying to see changes in attitudes and perceptions. And if that happens, consequently, we are seeing improved help-seeking behavior for these services we never needed. Now, in terms of our impact, I've tracked from 2019. We happen to have 5 contact events in schools, and we were able to reach out about 314 students. And of these, 62% of these were female students. Then in 2020, that's when we, the country, the world over, we're experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic. So we were unable to go have contact education sessions in the communities. So we shifted conversations online, and were able to conduct 9 online group contact sessions with the students. We had 2 events via Zoom, and we were able to reach out to 54 learners. But also we had a group WhatsApp chats that we conducted, reaching out to about 143 learners. So in total, in 2020, amidst the global challenges of COVID-19, we were able to utilize the online platforms, and were able to reach out this very number. So the following year, which was 2021, we conducted 4 contact events that we held in schools, and we were able to reach out to about 374 learners. And of these, 58% were female learners. Then last year, we were able to conduct 12 social events in schools, reaching out to about 500 plus learners, and of these, 66% were female students. So part of the campaigns in terms of stigma reduction that we have been able to execute, one of it has been in our own voice. So the goal of this campaign is basically to change our own attitudes, the assumption, but also the stereotypes that we do have about people with mental health conditions in Uganda. And we have been utilizing radio stations where we have people with lived experience going, they're being hosted in 2 local radio stations to go and share their stories. In so doing, we are trying to educate the public, the listeners, that look, these challenges are very common and they are part of us, but also having these challenges means not the end of you. Such challenges can recover and the person can lead a normal life. But also many times these talk shows are usually broadcasted onto Facebook. So we also have the audience on Facebook that can be listening in here and also channeling in their questions and feedback to see how we can improve our services. Then the next one that I wanted to speak about is the Chogereko, of which we can talk, call Let's Talk. So here, we are trying to champion mental health conversations among students. So the mode of delivery for this is that we have people with lived experience whom we go with in school settings. So we have them share the experiences with learners. So in so doing, we are trying to empower learners with the knowledge about mental health conditions are very common. And having these problems is not the end of the world for you. but also in so sharing our stories, we are empowering the learners to seek out services when needed. Then the last one that I want to share is the Break the Stigma campaign that we've been conducting on to our social media platforms. So the intention of this is we are trying to challenge stigma by sharing information flyers over our social media platforms. The intention is to engage the online audience, especially young people, over platforms like Twitter, over platforms like LinkedIn. So by sharing these resources, we be engaging the online audience to see how they can support, for example, loved ones or friends who are struggling with these challenges, but also to educate the online community about the prevalence of these conditions amongst us. Then finally, you cannot end without highlighting some of the challenges broadly that we are facing as a country in terms of our stigma work. So one, we have been able to categorize these into three. We have the social, then the cultural, and also the institutional. So among the social, we are seeing the awareness, understanding of mental health challenges is still a challenge within our population. So we need to design a lot of awareness campaigns to empower our population with information around mental health and how they can navigate services when needed. But also we are seeing negative labeling and language. As you know, some of in our local languages here, you find some of, for example, illnesses like depression. To find an equivalent of it in a local language, many times it becomes a challenge. So you find people referring to people with mental health challenges as mad in quotes, as people who are insane. So language and the negative labeling, we continue to see this as a challenge. Then around the culture, we see the gender roles and the masculinity norms in our cultural settings. You find that, for example, a man is not supposed to show signs of weaknesses, that you have to man up many times. So that is very, 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 very dangerous because it stops a lot of men battling mental challenges to suffer in silence for reasons not to be disclosed as weaker and incapable of not handling the daily stresses of life. But also around the culture and religious beliefs. Under the culture, many of within our culture here, we categorize mental illnesses as a result of witchcraft, which is a bit sad. So that also speaks to the level of effort that we need to do in terms of changing people's attitudes, but also the religious bit of it. You find people, for example, presenting with suicidal tendencies. Many times they fear to reach out, for example, for spiritual counseling. Because why? Most of within our religious settings, you find issues like suicide, they're a bit stigmatized, and fear, those who might be experiencing such issues, I find many times they're not able to seek support. But also around the institutional level, as earlier highlighted, issues around the budgeting, less than 1% of the health budget is allocated around mental health, but also around issues to do with the weaker policies and the legal framework. It was just so that in Ghana, they just decriminalized suicide, but for the case of Uganda, we see that suicide is still being criminalized, for example, so that hampers help-seeking behavior. But also we have issues around integration of mental health into healthcare systems. So what we are saying, we have set apart mental health institutions that are treating mental health issues. And that alone points to stigma, because why do you have to have specialized services for mental health? We need to have an integration of mental health services into the healthcare systems, that even people in rural areas, they are able to access mental health services. For example, the health center 1s, health center 2s, 3s, not necessarily traveling to urban centers where these services are centric. Then around, we have also issues around shortage of mental health professionals, as earlier highlighted, that we have one psychiatrist to a population of 1 million. So that also we need, I think, to focus a lot on to training specialists in those areas, but also empowering peer support services to supplement, to work hand in hand with the healthcare professionals to extend holistic care to people experiencing mental health difficulties. But also we have limited community mental health services. We don't have, so most of the community mental health work is being done by NGOs and user groups within communities. So in terms of government funding, there is no priority yet around community mental health services, but also around the data. We lack data systems that around, especially the prevalence of mental illness within our population. So that hampers planning, because if you don't have rightful numbers of those who are affected, then it becomes a little bit difficult to plan for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I think I've come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you.
Over
Thanks,
to
Godfrey.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Godfrey. I think that was wonderful. And just a big shout out to the work that you've been doing. We can see that there's a lot being done. Congratulations. Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep it going.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll get some questions later from the audience. Great. Okay, so thanks again, Godfrey. So now we're going to be moving on to having a little time frame for some music. So if I can hand it over back to Marvin for the second song, which I believe is called Never Going to Give It Away. So Marvin, over to you and your team. You are on mute, Marvin, just to let you know.
Yeah, I'm meeting. Just a minute. Jump low. Come on, come on. Look at that song. Hold this, huh? Are we good to go?
So many children. Never gonna give it away. Give it away.
We can't hear. I don't know if it's just from our side. No?
Never gonna give it away. Give it away. Never gonna give away. Never gonna give it away.
Can you hear?
That's good. I put my best. On the rules to be the shit last night. That's what my family done through. It's true. My gates, how to break my shape. My gates, how to break my heart. Nobody's gonna stop me here. Nobody's gonna stop me here. Yeah. Gotta stop my pride. To stop my pride. To blow victory. Never gonna give it away. Give it away. Never gonna give away. Never gonna give it away. Give it away. Never gonna give away. Never gonna give it to the front. I never knew how much time it was moving on. Only those who are afraid to be behind and the people on. I'm really stuck. You certainly must stay alive. The promises and guarantees. Only a clean head, only a clean vision. I got the style, I got me the style, I got me to survive. Like Nelson Mandela. I gotta stand live and bring the peace. Yeah, come on. Yeah, you feel me? Never gonna give it away. Give it away. Never gonna give it away. Give it away. Never gonna give away. Never gonna give it away. Give it away. Never gonna give away. Yeah. It's about time that we stand upright and for a hold. We'll never give up and never will ever bow down. I know life is a journey, like we always say. But always, our strength always matters so much. We gotta keep so much hard enough to see that we stand and see the future. Nobody say that love is always gonna be an easy game. But it's about us and keeping strong and making choice. We're always gonna give it. Never gonna give it away. That's it.
The biggest adventure you can take is to live the life of your dreams. Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is another stepping stone to greatness. Surround yourself with only people who are going to lift you higher. Be thankful for what you have. You'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you'll never, ever have enough. That's all we got for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin. It's great to hear about the hope and to not stop there when you need. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so Charlene, I just wanted a heads up, give everyone a heads up. We have a power outage in South Africa where Charlene is at the moment, so internet's a little bit unstable, so just bear with us with that. Renee, do you want me to hand over to you and we can have a look to see if there's any questions?
Yeah, so there was one question, but I can't immediately find it. Maybe Ovidio can find it. There was one question I just saw in the chat. So maybe Ovidio, did you find that one of Kamishka, Jacqueline Kamishka?
No, I don't see that question.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can put it again. And while waiting for that, so please put your questions in the question and answer. But I had a question myself to Godfrey. Because you and really.
But we gotta keep the faith and keep knowing that no matter what comes your way, you gotta keep.
And because it's really important what you are doing. Can you mute there, Marvin? But because you talked about you have in the Uganda's context, you have one psychiatrist to 2 million inhabitants, and then we have just calculated over 200 per million inhabitants. So that's completely different circumstances. But you also talked about explanations like witchcraft and describing it as a sad thing, whereas we also more and more tend to more how do I say appreciate people their own explanations. So how do you deal with people, for example, who deal with witchcraft? Can you is something that you fight, or can it be a collaboration and respect for different explanations? How do you look at that, Godfrey?
Yeah, thank you, Rennie, for that question. I think respond to that is so in terms of attitudes, negative attitudes around mental health, especially to do with witchcraft, as I believe, we are trying to work, for example, with the traditional herbalists. We know that these are first contacts when, for example, a person has been experiencing a mental health crisis in the community. So these work as first contacts. So what we are doing is we try to engage them through having some kind of dialogue to educate them that much as we appreciate what you are doing, but can we collaborate, for example, that after identifying these persons, please support in terms of referring to appropriate care for appropriate services. Yeah, so we are doing a lot of education to these kinds of groups, but also we work with local leaders in the communities who also from time to time we engage in mental health barazas that happen on a quarterly basis. So through empowering them with education around mental health challenges, they're able to identify these people in communities and then refer them to appropriate care. Another thing that I didn't mention, also supplement to the community work that we are doing, the Ministry of Health has the village health teams that are placed within each and every village of the country. So the areas where we work, we have identified these village health teams that we have brought together at village level to train them into basic mental health knowledge. So those are also good cadres that are helping us in identification of persons with these challenges, and they are being referred to appropriate care for support. Yeah, I think that's what I can highlight regarding that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for that answer and how you that way of finding connection. I was wondering, you, Claudia, because you live and work in South Africa, but now you're in the USA at present, so you can, in fact, you know both worlds. And for me, very important message that the high-income countries can learn from low-income countries. What's your impression about this? What can we, countries like the Netherlands, learn from the context in Africa?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's, we've got to get to the point where we're understanding how peer support what peer support looks like informally versus formally, because I think within the African context, there's a lot of peer support, but it's more of an informal, approach. So we're needing to learn as well. So just as much as maybe like you say, Netherlands learning from what's happening in Africa, Africa learning from what's happening in Netherlands helps as well, because it bridges that gap about what do we need to do. And then having been in the States now, I went to they call themselves like a living room where it's very peer support related, provided by lived experience. They're called thresholds. So maybe having a look at that and seeing how their work also in this higher income country can, if done properly, well, it is being done properly, but how can we implement that worldwide? I think everybody gets to learn. So I think for me, it's really just about sharing honest reflections about what's happening in the different areas, different contexts, and asking the question, what did you do that worked? What did you do that didn't? And us talking about it. And then going back to a question that I did see in the chat somewhere about research and how can research help with the barriers. Research is really informative. Going back to what Charlene said, it gives a basis for advocacy movements to take things forward, and educating, which is powerful. So maybe to Charlene, maybe you want to add in from that perspective.
Yeah, I think Africa, I think Africa or low and middle income countries or high income countries can learn a lot from low and middle income countries, in the sense that we tend to have very simple solutions to what seems to be complex issues. I can use one example, and I think it's kind of globally recognized. I'm not sure if you heard of it, the friendship bench, which started in Zimbabwe. I mean, a simple idea like that, where, how can I say, not grandmas or, like older women, were literally trained to provide support to their communities. And I think if you look at that concept, it's also built on the type of culture of Africa. We are very close-knit, very family-orientated. So I think what you can learn, I think context is extremely important to look and harness those aspects that's built into culture, like the closeness. What do you develop from that? It doesn't need to be complex solutions. I've once, when I visited India, another very simple example is homeless people, they were telling me homeless people who walk around there. I mean, they obviously don't have their medication and all that. So a community member would adopt them, kind of adopt them. They would come there. They don't necessarily remove them from the streets. Where we sometimes rather decide we remove them from the streets, put them in housing facility. In India, they go the other way around. They adopt the person goes there every morning to get tea and breakfast, get their medication, and they go back to the streets. Eventually, that person gets reunited with their families, and they get back to rebuilding those relationships. So I think we have very simple solutions too.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's very interesting insight and way to look at it. So we want to, before handing over to Björn for the final word, I would like, before that, maybe ask Vlatka how it was for you to meet fellow peer experts, in this case from Africa. What do you get from that, Vlatka?
Yeah. Oh, it was, I found so many similarities because Croatia is, how shall I say, low-income country with money. So I see a lot of similarity. And well, the great thing I get from all this presentation is to remind myself to not look what is wrong, but what is strong. So all that presentation, especially Jeffrey, inspire me to rethink about it again.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vlatka. So we're going to give the final word to Torbjörn for to wrap up and to reflect on this webinar. Torbjörn.
Thank you. While I was listening, actually, I remembered where I got my smile back, because that was where we started here this evening and my own recovery process. This is a picture from Croatia in 2012 after my depression. And I think this picture kind of balance different things here on your head. And what I take from this webinar is it's actually 5 things. I think it's inspired me kind of what you said about that artificial intelligence has recognized our work, Vlatka, but that the government and doesn't with the financing and stuff. And this is also something I recognize from Norway and from other countries that we speak about. And I think that we have to use time here, but to get the government to fund peer support. And I think that we have a long way to go from there on that. And the next point was it included from the start, which I think is something Charlene talked about. And I think this is also an issue that is really, we are not included from the start, like in research, also in Norway, many times that you're just included like in work group after they have decided the research questions and stuff, but the importance of being included from the start. And the third point, I think, and this is something I think we all should do more on, it's like 1 psychiatrist and 1 million people. And the work that Gottfried is doing with the peer support groups, and that you're doing, Vlatka, it's like we can really use this resource of peer support workers and lived experience to kind of really get people better lives. And the fourth one is also in the EUCOMS kind of way of thinking. And let's talk together, let's learn together, which I think is really important here. And across the globe, kind of these webinars or other global initiatives, is important that we talk together and learn from each other, because there's so many similarities across the world. But also we have to be really aware that what we're doing right now with this, we are pioneers, this is new, this is breaking new grounds. And just listening to you guys, you're both inspiring, and you're also innovators where you are at in your processes. So I think I'll leave it with that, but thanks to you for a really inspiring webinar. And
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Torbjörn, for this wonderful wrap up, immediately including the message of the AI. So that's really, really well done. And the peers and pioneers, that's a good new rhyme, and that's what we are. So happy to have been with you this evening, or at least in the Netherlands it's an evening. We've come here from 3 different continents, I saw, so that was really a way of connecting. For your calendar, please know that we will have another EUCOMS webinar on October 11 about models of care, that is. So put it in your agenda. We hope to see you again there. And then I'm going to give the final word to my co-host Claudia.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I echo what you're saying. I think this was really awesome, from peers to pioneers. I think that's amazing. And we had a question in which I managed to answer, but it's just about the lingo and the terminology that we use. And I think that's important as part of the wrap up, just to make everyone aware, think about not so much what you're saying, but how you say it. That's important. And the example that was used here was depression. Instead of saying like, I am depressed, we should be saying things a little bit more positively, in the sense of sadness is upon me. So thank you, Antonio, that was in the chat that mentioned that. I think let's just bring that as well as part of our lessons learned to kind of reduce the stigma a little bit, the terminology. And a big, big thank you to all our presenters. Thank you for your time and your inspiring work. Keep it up, and looking forward to our next one, Renee.
Yeah, exactly. And I do have one more message I was just aware.
Yeah,
is that we are going to have a meeting, and here it is. So EUCOMS comes together 2 times per year. The next one is going to be in September in Leuven, but that's connected with a larger conference. But this one is, again, an exclusive EUCOMS meeting that we're going to have in Cologne in Germany on March 14 and 15 next year. So please put that in your agendas as well, and hope to see you many, because we always combine. We're a blended network. We meet online with these webinars, but 2 times a year we meet on location. So we hope to see many of us there, because there's very important and good things going on in Germany just as well. So that's it for me. Thank you also on behalf of Claudia. Thank to all the speakers. Thank you to the great musicians from Uganda. This was a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
great. Thank you, everybody. Take care.